Emily Bonaparte was the great-granddaughter of Napoleon Bonaparte, and Pierre was a simple gardener at the Château de Lumière. They fell hopelessly in love, but little did they imagine that what secret buried deep in the gardens of Château de Lumière could change the course of Emily and Pierre's forbidden love forever. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Emily Bonaparte wandered through the opulent gardens of the Château de Lumière, the sun casting a golden hue over the meticulously manicured hedges and vibrant floral displays that surrounded her. Each step she took resonated with the weight of her family's legacy, a lineage that stretched back to the formidable figure of Napoleon Bonaparte. The air was fragrant with the scent of blooming roses, their petals unfurling like delicate secrets in the gentle breeze. As she moved deeper into the garden, her heart felt heavy with the expectations that came with her noble birth. She was a Bonaparte, and her fate seemed to be predetermined by lineage and societal norms. The gardens themselves were a testament to the grandeur of the chateau, sprawling expanses of color and life, where every flower and shrub had been carefully curated. Yet, amidst this beauty, Emily felt a growing sense of constraint. The vibrant colors of the petals around her only seemed to highlight the grayness of her obligations. She paused momentarily, allowing herself to bask in the serenity of the moment, letting her fingers graze the edges of a nearby rosebush. The thorns pricked her skin, a sharp reminder of the pain that often accompanies beauty. Her gaze drifted across the garden, landing on a figure diligently tending to the roses. It was Pierre, the humble gardener, who had become a fixture in her thoughts over the past few weeks. His hands moved skillfully through the petals, weaving through the delicate blooms with a grace that belied his station. He worked as if he were in communion with the flowers, each cut and trim a loving gesture that spoke of his passion for the earth and its gifts. Emily felt an inexplicable pull towards him, a magnetic force that drew her closer with each passing day. She had observed him from a distance, captivated by his dedication and the ease with which he seemed to flow with the natural world around him. As she approached, she noted the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the sunlight casting a halo around his figure, making him appear almost ethereal. For a moment, Emily allowed herself to forget about the world beyond the garden walls, the pressures of her family's expectations and the weight of her heritage. Here, amongst the blooms and the diligent hands of the gardener, she felt a glimmer of freedom, a whisper of possibility that danced tantalizingly at the edges of her consciousness. Emily stopped a few paces away from Pierre, hidden partially behind a grand hydrangea bush. She watched as he paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, his expression one of contentment as he surveyed the roses that had flourished under his care. In that moment, she felt a surge of admiration for him, not only for his skill but for the quiet strength that emanated from him. He was not a man of titles or wealth, but there was a richness in his spirit that resonated with her own longing for authenticity. Just then, their eyes met, and Emily caught her breath. There was a spark in that moment, an unspoken acknowledgement of something deeper than the roles they were expected to play. Pierre's gaze held a warmth that sent a flutter through her heart. In that brief exchange, she sensed a shared understanding, a connection that transcended the societal boundaries that defined their lives. Emily felt her cheeks flush, a sensation that both thrilled and frightened her. She was acutely aware of the chasm between them, the daughter of a count and a mere gardener. But at that instant, it felt as if the world outside the garden faded away. The chemistry between them was palpable, charged with an energy that crackled in the air. Emily felt a wild urge to step forward, to close the distance that separated them, but uncertainty held her back. She was raised to be a lady of society, groomed to navigate the intricate dance of aristocracy, and yet here was Pierre, with his earth-stained hands and earnest eyes, igniting a fire within her that she had never known. What would her family say? What would society think? These questions loomed like dark clouds on the horizon of her thoughts. With a heavy heart, Emily turned away from him, retreating to the familiar paths of the garden, where the blooms swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. She could not ignore the tug at her heart, nor could she deny the warmth that lingered in her cheeks from their brief encounter. As she walked, her mind raced with the implications of her feelings for Pierre. How could she possibly entertain the notion of something more? The very idea felt like a betrayal to her family's honor. Yet the allure of the forbidden called to her. Later that evening, Emily sat in her chamber, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against the walls adorned with tapestries of her illustrious lineage. She gazed out of the window, the moon casting a silver sheen over the gardens below, illuminating the very spot where she had seen Pierre. She could still envision him, the way he had moved among the roses, a part of the garden itself. Emily felt a surge of emotion welling within her as she wrestled with her conflicting desires. As the night deepened, she turned to her childhood friend, Colette, who was visiting for the weekend. Colette was a vivacious spirit, full of laughter and wit, and Emily often found solace in her company. She confided in her about the strange feelings that had begun to awaken inside her, feelings that had grown with each stolen glance shared with the gardener. Colette listened intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as Emily spoke of the connection she felt with Pierre. Emily's heart raced as she recounted the moment their eyes had locked, the thrill of the unspoken bond that had ignited between them. Yet, as she spoke, a shadow of doubt crept into her mind. Colette, ever practical, warned her of the complications that could arise from such a romance. Emily's heart sank at the thought. She had always known the importance of social standings, the rigid hierarchy that defined their world. She felt trapped between the desire for love and the weight of her family's expectations. Despite Colette's warnings, Emily's determination to follow her heart grew stronger with each passing moment. The idea of a life bound by duty and expectation felt suffocating when compared to the vibrant possibility that Pierre represented. As the candlelight flickered and cast dancing shadows on the walls, Emily made a silent vow to herself. She would explore this connection, this burgeoning love, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The garden, with its roses and secrets, had become a sanctuary, a place where she could embrace the beauty of her own desires, a hidden realm where love could bloom against all odds. Emily found herself drawn to the gardens of Château de Lumière with an urgency that defied her upbringing. The opulence surrounding her, inherited from a lineage steeped in history, faded into the background as she ventured deeper into the lush expanse of flora. Each visit became a pilgrimage of sorts, a sacred ritual where the barriers of her aristocratic world dissolved in the presence of Pierre, the humble gardener. She would arrive under the pretense of exploring the garden, but her true purpose was always the same: to see him, to share a fleeting moment of connection that felt both exhilarating and forbidden. On one particular afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the petals of blooming roses. Emily approached with a basket cradled in her arms, filled with pastries she had carefully crafted in the kitchen. The aroma of fresh butter and sugar wafted through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of damp soil and blossoming flowers. As she neared the clearing where Pierre toiled, her heart raced with anticipation. The sight of him, his hands deftly pruning the branches, brought a smile to her lips. He was fully immersed in his work, the sun glinting off his dark hair and illuminating the strong lines of his face. Emily watched him for a moment, her breath hitching at the sight of his focused demeanor. It struck her how effortlessly he merged with his surroundings, a guardian of nature amidst the cultivated chaos of the garden. With a gentle rustle of leaves beneath her feet, she announced her presence, and Pierre looked up, his expression transforming from concentration to delight in an instant. Their meetings unfolded like delicate blossoms, fragile yet vibrant, each shared pastry a symbol of their growing bond. They exchanged stories and laughter, weaving a tapestry of dreams that seemed to stretch far beyond the confines of the garden. Pierre spoke of his aspirations, his voice filled with passion as he described a vision of a garden that could rival even the most famed landscapes in France. Emily listened, her heart swelling with admiration for his dedication and creativity. Each time they met, they envisioned together a revitalization of a neglected section of the estate, an area overrun by weeds and shadows. She could see the potential in that forgotten corner, a hidden gem waiting to be unearthed. The idea of working side by side with Pierre ignited a fire within her. Together, they began to sketch out plans, mapping their ideas onto scraps of parchment while surrounded by the fragrant blooms. Emily's laughter rang like music in the air, a sweet melody that danced around them as they envisioned vibrant flowers, cascading vines, and fragrant herbs filling the once desolate space. However, as their shared dreams flourished, so too did the whispers among the castle's staff. Rumors began to circulate, tales of the young heiress and the gardener that stirred unease among those who served the noble family. Emily remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the confines of their secret meetings. The garden, once a sanctuary, now bore the weight of unspoken scrutiny. Still, she found solace in Pierre's presence, where time stood still and the world outside faded into insignificance. Yet, outside the garden, the reality of Emily's life loomed heavily. Count Lucien, her father, was a man of high expectations, a man who had built his reputation on lineage and status. He was a formidable figure, a keeper of traditions that dictated who was worthy of his daughter's affections. Emily felt the pull of her family's expectations, the duty that came with her name. But the ache in her heart for Pierre grew stronger with each passing day. One morning, as the air turned crisp with the onset of autumn, Emily arrived at the garden to find Pierre surveying their work with a glimmer of pride in his eyes. The neglected section was beginning to transform under their care, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as though their dreams were within reach. However, the shadows of doubt crept in as Emily recalled her father's stern warnings against mingling with those of lower status. The weight of her lineage pressed down on her like an anchor, and a fear began to gnaw at her heart. Count Lucien's voice echoed in her mind, his disapproving gaze piercing through her resolve. He had always emphasized the importance of status, the need to maintain the family's reputation. The thought of disappointing him filled her with dread, and yet, the idea of losing Pierre was unbearable. She watched as Pierre knelt among the flowers, his hands working with the earth that seemed to respond eagerly to his touch, and she felt the clash of her two worlds, a love that blossomed in secrecy against the expectations of a legacy she could not escape. As the days wore on, the tension within Emily grew palpable. Each clandestine meeting with Pierre became a bittersweet reminder of the love they shared and the obstacles that lay ahead. The garden, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a battleground of emotions, a place where joy and despair danced in a delicate balance. She knew she had to confront her father, to plead with him for understanding, but the thought of his wrath sent tremors of fear through her. The inevitable came to pass one evening when Emily found herself in the drawing room, where her father sat surrounded by the trappings of his status. The room was filled with the scent of polished wood and the flickering glow of candlelight, creating an atmosphere both warm and suffocating. Count Lucien regarded his daughter with a mixture of pride and expectation, his gaze sharp and scrutinizing. Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she prepared to voice her feelings. She had rehearsed her words in her mind, but as she opened her mouth to speak, the weight of her father's presence rendered her momentarily speechless. The air felt thick with tension, and she struggled to find the courage to express her heart's desire. Count Lucien, sensing her hesitation, leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting to one of concern. "Emily, my dear, you know the importance of our family's name. You must understand that your choices reflect upon us all." Those words hung in the air like a heavy shroud, a reminder of the chasm that separated her from Pierre. As she met her father's gaze, a resolve began to build within her. She thought of Pierre's laughter, the dreams they shared, and the way he made her feel alive in a way she had never known. The struggle between her heart and her heritage raged within her, and she knew she had to choose. But before she could muster the words to defend her love, the door creaked open, and a staff member entered, their expression fraught with urgency. The tension in the room shifted, and Emily's heart sank as she realized that their secret was on the verge of exposure. Whispers had begun to weave through the castle, and the very fabric of her clandestine romance was unraveling before her eyes. In that moment, Emily understood that their love was now a fragile thread, teetering on the brink of discovery. As she glanced at her father, a mixture of fear and determination coursed through her veins. She would fight for her love, but the path ahead was fraught with peril. The garden, once a place of joy, now mirrored the turmoil within her heart, a beautiful, chaotic blend of hope and uncertainty. Emily stood in her opulent room at the Château de Lumière, her heart racing as she gazed out of the tall, arched window. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sprawling gardens below, where she had shared so many stolen moments with Pierre. Yet, that day, the vibrant colors of the garden felt muted, overshadowed by the heavy cloak of impending obligation that draped over her shoulders like an unwelcome shroud. Her father, Count Lucien, had made it clear that he intended to secure her future with a match deemed suitable in his eyes, a wealthy suitor who could uphold their family's esteemed name. Henri, a man of considerable fortune and status, had been paraded before her as the ideal candidate, a pawn in her father's game of social chess. The thought of Henri made Emily's stomach churn. She remembered the way he had smiled at her, all charm and polished manners. But it was a smile that felt distant and shallow compared to the genuine warmth she experienced with Pierre. He was not merely a gardener. He was a man of dreams, aspirations, and a depth that reached beyond his humble station. The mere thought of being tied to someone like Henri, whose motivations seemed to stem from ambition rather than affection, filled her with dread. Emily's heart belonged to Pierre, a truth she could no longer conceal from herself. As the days passed, the tension in the air grew palpable. Emily felt a tightening in her chest each time she encountered Henri in the chateau. He would approach her with an air of self-assuredness that grated against her nerves, each polite inquiry about her well-being feeling like a chain tightening around her heart. The more she resisted, the more insistent her father became, insisting that she give Henri a chance to prove himself. Emily felt trapped, caught in a web spun from her family's expectations and the suffocating weight of tradition. One evening, under the dim light of her candlelit room, Emily found herself staring at the intricate designs of her wedding gown hanging in the corner. The delicate lace and satin shimmered in the flickering light, a stark reminder of the future her father envisioned for her. It was an image that filled her with anxiety. The dress was beautiful, but it felt like a costume, one that would mask her true self. She longed for a different future, one where love would dictate her choices instead of social standing. In the quiet of the night, she made her way to the gardens, the moon illuminating her path through the hedges. The cool air enveloped her, offering a brief respite from the turmoil within. As she approached the familiar spot where she often met Pierre, the scent of blooming roses greeted her, a fragrant reminder of the bond they shared. Her heart swelled with longing at the thought of seeing him, but the reality of her situation loomed over her like a dark cloud. When Pierre finally appeared, the world around her faded into insignificance. His presence brought light to her troubled heart, as if he were the sun breaking through the thickest of clouds. They stood together in a comfortable silence, the only sounds being the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant crooning of nightingales. Emily could see the concern etched on his face, a mirror to her own fears. She had come to confide in him, to share the burden that felt too heavy to carry alone. As they settled on a bench hidden beneath a sprawling oak tree, Emily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking. She described the pressure she faced from her father, the way Henri's presence loomed like a dark shadow over her heart. Pierre listened intently, his blue eyes filled with understanding and compassion. Each word she spoke seemed to resonate with him, a shared understanding of the pain of being torn between duty and desire. The moonlight cast soft shadows across their faces, highlighting the delicate features that had become so familiar to her. Emily felt a spark of hope ignite within her as she glanced at Pierre, his expression unwavering, filled with quiet strength. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining effortlessly, a silent promise of support and love. In that moment, she knew that their connection ran deeper than the constraints of societal expectations. Pierre spoke of his dreams, his plans for the garden they had envisioned together. He painted a picture of a place where beauty thrived, a sanctuary filled with vibrant blooms and the sweet fragrance of nature, a place that would reflect their shared aspirations. Emily felt her heart swell with pride at his determination, but deep down, she feared that such dreams might remain forever out of reach. As the night wore on, they shared laughter and whispered secrets, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. Yet, beneath the surface of their joy, a dark anxiety simmered. Emily could not shake the feeling that time was running out. Her father's plans for her future were taking shape with alarming speed, and she felt powerless to stop them. The following day, the chateau was abuzz with preparations for the upcoming Grand Ball, an event that promised to be the highlight of the season. Emily felt a sense of dread wash over her as she realized that this would be the night when she would be expected to walk beside Henri, showcasing the union her father was so eager to forge. The thought of facing the crowd, adorned in finery while her heart yearned for another, was almost unbearable. She could envision the glances exchanged, the whispers of the court as they speculated about her future with Henri, while her thoughts would be consumed by the image of Pierre, standing alone in the shadows. As she dressed for the ball, the exquisite fabric brushed against her skin, a constant reminder of the role she was to play. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, extolling the virtues of propriety and the importance of family alliances. Emily felt the weight of those expectations pressing down on her, stifling her spirit. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, and for a moment, the image staring back at her was a stranger, an embodiment of the life her father had carved out for her. When the evening finally arrived, the grand hall of the chateau was transformed into a dazzling spectacle. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, their light casting a warm glow on the elegantly dressed guests. The air was thick with the sounds of laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses, yet Emily felt detached, as if she were merely an observer in a world that no longer felt like her own. Henri appeared at her side, his demeanor charming and confident, as he led her into the swirling dance of the evening. Emily moved through the crowd like a ghost, her mind racing as she searched for any sign of Pierre amidst the sea of faces. The music played on, and laughter filled the air. Yet all she could think about was the man who held her heart, the one who made her feel truly alive. As the night wore on, Emily's heart ached with the knowledge that she was playing a role in a performance that felt increasingly like a prison. She danced with Henri, her movements graceful but devoid of passion. Each turn and spin left her yearning for the freedom she had found in Pierre's company, the authenticity of their connection that was light years away from the polished facade she was maintaining. Meanwhile, Pierre, with a heart heavy with determination, found himself standing at the edge of the ballroom, feeling like a stranger in a world that seemed to turn without him. He had come not only to witness Emily's struggle, but to confront his own feelings, to gather the courage to voice what had been bottled up inside him for far too long. His gaze was fixed on Emily as she twirled under the dazzling lights, and in that moment, the weight of his unspoken love felt almost unbearable. The night wore on, and as Emily continued to dance with Henri, she felt the walls closing in around her. The laughter of her peers echoed in her ears, but it was a hollow sound, a reminder of the life she was being forced into. The joy of the evening felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the reality of her heart's desire, which lay beyond the ornate doors of the ballroom. Deep down, she knew that she had to make a choice, to confront the truths that had been hidden by the expectations of her family. And as she stood there, surrounded by the glittering crowd, Emily felt the first stirrings of resolve. The night was far from over, and within her chest, a flicker of hope ignited. A hope that she could break free from the chains binding her. A hope that love could triumph over all. The grand ballroom of Chateau de Lumière was awash with flickering candlelight, the air thick with the scent of blooming lilacs and the soft rustle of silks and satins. Emily stood at the center of the opulence, a radiant figure in her flowing gown, adorned with delicate lace and shimmering pearls. Her heart, however, felt as heavy as the ornate chandelier hanging above her, glistening with crystals that caught the light in a way that mirrored her turmoil. She moved gracefully through the crowd, her dance with Henri, a man of impeccable lineage and status, felt choreographed but devoid of true emotion. Each twirl and spin seemed to echo the conflict within her, a struggle between the expectations of her family and the yearnings of her heart. As she swirled around the ballroom, Emily's gaze darted across the sea of elegantly dressed guests, searching intently for a familiar face. The laughter and chatter around her faded into a distant hum, replaced by the thudding of her heart as it called out for Pierre. She could almost feel the warmth of his presence, the way his fingers would brush against hers as they shared whispered secrets in the garden, far away from the scrutiny of the world. The memory of his laughter, a sound as rich and vibrant as the blooms he tended, fueled her desire to escape the gilded cage she found herself in. Yet, with each passing moment, the reality of her situation became clearer. She was trapped in a dance she had not chosen, tethered to a future she did not desire. Henri, with his charming smile and polished demeanor, spoke of ambitions and dreams of a life filled with power and prestige. Yet Emily could only respond with polite nods, her thoughts drifting back to the garden where everything felt simple and pure. The warmth of the sun, the fragrance of the roses, and the laughter that echoed between her and Pierre were memories she clung to like a lifeline. The ball felt like a masquerade, a performance where everyone wore their finest masks, hiding their true selves beneath layers of societal expectations. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. There, at the edge of the ballroom, just beyond the cascade of silk and velvet, was Pierre. He was a mere shadow among the bright and extravagant figures, but the sight of him sent a jolt through her. He looked out of place in his humble attire, yet there was an undeniable strength in his posture, a quiet determination that drew her in. Emily's heart raced as she struggled against the constraints of her situation, longing to break free from Henry's hold and rush into Pierre's arms. But the music swelled, the dance continued, and she was trapped, a puppet in a grand performance. As the waltz reached its crescendo, Emily felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. The laughter and gaiety of the ball seemed to mock her inner turmoil, a constant reminder of the choice she had to make. Should she continue this charade with Henri, a man who offered her safety and status, or should she defy everything she had been taught about duty and expectation for the love that consumed her thoughts? The very fabric of her existence felt torn between two worlds, and the more she danced, the more the desperation for freedom grew. Meanwhile, Pierre stood under the archway, his heart heavy as he watched Emily spin elegantly with Henri. The grandeur of the hall loomed over him, a stark contrast to the serenity of the garden they had shared. He felt like an outsider, a mere gardener amidst nobility, but he also felt an undeniable determination to reach her. Despite the whispers and glances that accompanied his entrance, he was resolute. The moment he laid eyes on Emily, he knew he could not remain a silent spectator any longer. She was his muse, the embodiment of everything he had ever desired, and he could no longer let fear dictate his actions. Gathering his courage, Pierre stepped forward, weaving through the crowd as the music played on, a symphony of emotions swirling around him. He could see the confusion in Emily's eyes, the way she tried to maintain a facade while her heart screamed for release. Each step he took seemed to echo his determination, the rhythm of his heartbeat matching the cadence of the music. He was aware of the eyes that followed him, some curious, others disapproving, but he paid them no mind. His focus was solely on Emily, the woman who had ignited a fire within him that he could no longer ignore. As he approached, Emily felt a rush of hope, her heart leaping at the sight of him. The world around her faded, the laughter and chatter dissolving into a distant echo. The dance with Henri felt like a mere shadow of her reality. The moment she locked eyes with Pierre, she felt an electric connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. It was as if time stood still, the music faded to a whisper, and all that existed was the space between them. A space filled with longing and unspoken promises. Just as Pierre reached her side, a voice boomed through the hall, slicing through the atmosphere like a knife. Count Lucien, his face a mask of fury, had spotted his daughter and the common gardener together. The atmosphere shifted, the laughter stilled, and a palpable tension filled the room. Emily's heart sank as she realized the confrontation that was about to unfold. Count Lucien stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger, as he demanded to know what Pierre was doing there, daring to approach his daughter. Emily felt a surge of defiance rise within her, the years of restraint and expectation crashing against the walls she had built around her heart. She could no longer remain silent. She could no longer let her father dictate her life. As he shouted at Pierre, Emily stepped between them, her voice steady and unwavering. She stood tall, her heart racing, knowing that this was the moment that would define her. The ballroom was a whirlwind of gasps and murmurs, the guests captivated by the unfolding drama. Count Lucien's face turned crimson with rage, but Emily held her ground, fueled by a love that transcended the barriers of class and expectation. In that moment, she declared her truth, her feelings for Pierre spilling forth like the petals of a blooming flower, vibrant and unapologetic. She spoke of the love that had blossomed in secret, the connection that had grown amidst the roses and the whispers of the wind. Her declaration hung in the air, reverberating through the grand hall, leaving the guests in stunned silence. Emily stood firm, her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that this moment could shatter everything she had ever known. But the fire in her soul burned brighter than the fear of her father's wrath. She had chosen love, and in that choice, she found a strength she never knew she possessed. As the confrontation escalated, the ballroom became a battleground of wills. Emily's eyes never left Pierre's, seeking the reassurance that they would face whatever came next together. She could feel the weight of her father's anger, the shock of the guests, but in that chaos, there was a sense of liberation. For the first time in her life, Emily felt truly alive, unencumbered by the chains of expectation. Her heart was no longer a prisoner. It was free to soar, to love, and to fight for the future she desired. The tension in the air was thick, anticipation crackling like electricity. Emily stood resolute, ready to embrace the consequences of her actions, ready to face whatever storm lay ahead, knowing that Pierre was by her side, and together they would weather it all. The ballroom was still, the air thick with tension following Emily's bold declaration of love for Pierre. Count Lucien's face twisted in disbelief, anger radiating from him like heat from a flame. His daughter had shattered the carefully constructed facade of their family's expectations, leaving the guests in a state of stunned silence. Henri, humiliated and furious, clenched his fists, his mind racing with thoughts of revenge. The opulent decorations around them seemed to mock the chaos that had erupted, the chandeliers casting their shimmering light over an atmosphere now charged with conflict. Emily stood firm, her heart racing as she locked eyes with Pierre. In that moment, the world around her faded. The gilded walls, the murmurs of the attendees, and her father's fury all became distant echoes. She had chosen her path, and nothing would sway her resolve. Pierre, too, felt the weight of the moment. His heart swelled with pride and trepidation, knowing that their love had become a battleground. The whispers of the crowd began to rise, a cacophony of disbelief and intrigue, and Emily could feel their judgment heavy upon her shoulders. As Count Lucien took a step forward, his voice low but fierce, the air crackled with unspoken threats. "You will regret this, Emily. You bring shame upon our family." His eyes blazed with fury, a storm brewing within him. The people around them shifted uneasily, caught between the spectacle and the gravity of the situation. Henri, sensing an opportunity in the chaos, straightened his posture and interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. He vowed to ruin Pierre, to tarnish his reputation in a way that would ensure the gardener would never again be welcome in their world. The words hung in the air like a dark omen, and Emily's heart sank at the cruelty of it all. In the midst of the unfolding drama, Emily felt an overwhelming urge to protect Pierre. Her heart ached for him, for the injustice of it all. She turned to him, her gaze pleading, and in that fleeting moment, they shared an understanding that transcended the chaos around them. Without further thought, Emily took Pierre's hand, her fingers intertwining with his, and pulled him toward the exit. They slipped away from the ballroom, navigating through the throng of shocked guests, the whispers now a low hum behind them. The garden awaited them, a sanctuary of beauty and solace that felt like a world apart from the turmoil they had just escaped. As they entered the moonlit expanse, the fragrant blooms enveloped them, their sweet scent a stark contrast to the bitterness they had left behind. The soft glow of the moon illuminated the path, and Emily's heart began to calm as they walked deeper into the lush greenery. It was their refuge, a place where they had shared laughter, dreams, and now, a love that defied their circumstances. Once they reached a secluded spot beneath an ancient oak tree, Emily turned to Pierre, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. They were both breathing heavily, the adrenaline of their escape mingling with the intoxicating fragrance of the flowers. In that moment, the world outside faded completely, leaving only the two of them in their sacred space. Emily's heart swelled as she stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until there was no space left to hide. Their lips met, a collision of passion and longing that ignited a fire within them. It was a kiss that spoke of defiance, of promises made beneath the stars. Their love had been thrust into the spotlight, and now they were determined to fight for it. The taste of freedom lingered on their tongues as they lost themselves in the embrace, the garden around them becoming a witness to their commitment. Time seemed to stand still, and in that fleeting moment, nothing else mattered but the connection they shared. Yet, even amidst their joy, a shadow loomed on the horizon. Henry's words echoed in Emily's mind, a reminder of the world they had left behind. She pulled away slightly, looking into Pierre's eyes, searching for reassurance. She could see the determination etched on his face, the strength that had drawn her to him from the very beginning. They were bound together by something greater than themselves, a force that would not easily be extinguished. But as the moonlight bathed them in its silvery glow, far from their sanctuary, Henri was already plotting his revenge. The seed of malice had taken root in his heart, and he was determined to separate Emily and Pierre at any cost. He began to weave a tapestry of lies, whispers that would soon tarnish Pierre's name. With each passing moment, Henry's fury transformed into a calculated plan, his mind racing with schemes that would ensure he reclaimed Emily's heart and dismantled the bond that had formed between her and Pierre. Back in the garden, Emily and Pierre were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their sanctuary. They spoke of their dreams, of a future they could build together, oblivious to the malicious intent lurking in the shadows. Emily's laughter rang through the air, a sweet melody that intertwined with the rustling leaves, and for a moment, they felt invincible. They promised each other that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, their spirits unyielding against the weight of their family's expectations. But as dawn approached, the reality of their situation hung over them like a heavy cloud. Emily's heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She knew that the path they had chosen would not be easy, but the thought of losing Pierre was unbearable. The garden that had once been a refuge now felt like a battleground, a place where their love would be tested against the forces that sought to tear them apart. As the first light of morning began to filter through the trees, Emily and Pierre shared one last tender kiss, a promise sealed with their hearts. They reluctantly stepped back from each other, knowing that the challenges they faced would soon come to a head. With heavy hearts, they turned to leave the garden, unaware of the darkness that awaited them just beyond its borders. In the days that followed, the seeds of Henry's deceit took root within the castle walls. Rumors began to swirl, whispered tales that painted Pierre as a lecherous interloper, a man unworthy of Emily's love. Henry's carefully crafted lies spread like wildfire, igniting the imaginations and prejudices of those around them. The once serene atmosphere was now charged with suspicion and disdain, each glance cast in Pierre's direction filled with contempt. Emily felt the weight of the world pressing down upon her as she navigated the halls of the chateau. The whispers grew louder, and the laughter that once accompanied her walks through the gardens had been replaced by scornful remarks and judgmental glances. She sought out Pierre, desperate to reassure him, but the walls seemed to close in, separating them with each passing day. Every encounter was fraught with tension, and each moment apart felt like an eternity. Emily's heart ached for the love they had shared in the garden, the promise they had made beneath the ancient oak. The world outside had become a battlefield, and she could feel the distance growing, a chasm carved by the lies that Henri had spun. Despite the darkness surrounding them, Emily clung to the hope that their love was strong enough to withstand the storm. In the quiet moments, she would steal away to the garden, seeking solace in the blooms that had witnessed their love. The roses nodded in the gentle breeze, their petals soft against her fingertips, reminding her of the tenderness she had found in Pierre's embrace. She closed her eyes, imagining his touch, the warmth of his presence, and the laughter they had shared. In those moments, she prayed for strength for both of them to confront the challenges that lay ahead. Little did she know, the battle for their love was only just beginning. The air around Chateau de Lumière had thickened with tension, a palpable silence settling over the once vibrant gardens. Pierre, who had poured his heart and soul into the very soil of this estate, now felt like a ghost haunting the place he once called his sanctuary. The whispers of the staff, once filled with admiration for his artistry with the roses and the rich tapestry of foliage, had turned into murmurs of disdain. It was as if the very flowers he nurtured had wilted in response to the frost of Henry's malice. Each day, Pierre arrived at work under the oppressive weight of disdainful glares, a stark contrast to the warmth he had once felt from Emily and the other residents of the chateau. Emily watched her beloved from her window, a heavy heart lodged in her chest. The vibrant colors of the garden seemed dulled, mirroring her sorrow. She had pleaded with her father, Count Lucien, to see the truth behind the fabrications spun by Henri, but the Count's pride stood immovable. The more Emily insisted that Pierre was innocent, the more her father's resolve hardened, fueled by the belief that he was protecting the family's legacy. To Count Lucien, the whispers of scandal were more dangerous than the truth of love. Refusing to allow any association with the gardener, he turned a deaf ear to his daughter's heartfelt pleas, insisting that Pierre was unworthy of their family name. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's heart ached with every passing moment. The garden had become Pierre's prison, the place where he once found solace now tainted by the shadows of distrust. Emily longed to comfort him, to remind him of their love, but the distance imposed by her father's will was a chasm too wide to cross. The vibrant laughter they once shared was replaced by silence, a silence that echoed through the rows of roses now shrouded in an air of sadness. It was during one of her evening walks through the garden that Emily stumbled upon an old and forgotten shed, its door creaking open as if inviting her in. Inside, amongst the lingering scent of damp earth and aged wood, she discovered a hidden compartment in the floor. With trembling hands, she pried it open, unveiling a bundle of yellowed letters, their edges frayed with time. As she carefully unfolded one of the letters, her heart raced. The contents revealed a shocking connection between her family and the wealthy suitor, Henri. It detailed a scheming nature, a manipulative streak that had been buried beneath a facade of charm and elegance. As the realization dawned on her, Emily felt a surge of determination swell within her. Henri had orchestrated the entire situation, twisting the truth to suit his desires. Armed with this newfound knowledge, she resolved to confront her father. The weight of the letter pressed heavily in her pocket as she made her way to the grand study where Count Lucien often retreated, away from the chaos of the world outside. Standing at the threshold, Emily hesitated for a moment. The imposing figure of her father, with his stern gaze and rigid posture, filled her with trepidation. But her love for Pierre ignited a flame of courage within her. With the letter clutched tightly in her hands, she stepped forward. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing along the walls, reflecting the turmoil within her heart. "Father," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. The Count looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. With every ounce of conviction, Emily laid bare the truth, detailing Henry's deceit and manipulation. She presented the letter, its contents revealing the extent of Henry's treachery. Count Lucien's brows knitted together in disbelief as he took the letter from her, reading the words that could unravel the web of lies spun around them. The room filled with a heavy silence, the air crackling with tension as the truth began to settle in. As her father read, Emily watched the transformation in his demeanor. The rigid lines of his face softened, and for the first time, she saw a glimpse of vulnerability in his eyes. The realization that he had allowed a false narrative to dictate his decisions struck him with a force he could not ignore. "Emily," he finally spoke, his voice low and filled with regret. "I didn't know. I thought I was protecting you." "Father, you were blinded by your own pride," she replied, her heart racing. You let a man like Henri manipulate you, and in doing so, you almost destroyed the love I have for Pierre. The Count's gaze fell to the floor, shame washing over him as he processed his daughter's words. Emily dared to take a step closer, her heart pounding in her chest. You must understand, father. Pierre is not just a gardener. He is a man of passion and dreams. He has worked tirelessly for the beauty of this garden, and more importantly, he has captured my heart. The weight of her confession hung in the air, and for a moment, Count Lucien remained silent. Then, with a deep breath, he raised his eyes to meet hers. What do you wish me to do, Emily? Stand with me, she implored. Expose Henri for who he truly is. Let the court see the truth, and allow me to be with Pierre without fear of repercussions. With a heavy heart and a newfound resolve, Emily led her father back to the grand hall, where the court had gathered for an evening of revelry. The atmosphere was charged with murmurs of gossip, the air thick with the lingering effects of Henri's manipulations. As they entered, all eyes turned to them, curiosity swirling in the air like a tempest. Emily stepped forward, her heart racing as she prepared to unveil the truth. Esteemed guests, she called, her voice ringing clear and resolute. I stand before you not only as the daughter of Count Lucien, but as a woman in love. I have uncovered the deceit that has plagued my family and my heart. Gasps echoed through the room as she revealed Henri's schemes, detailing the letters that exposed his manipulative nature. The atmosphere shifted, the whispers of scandal transforming into gasps of disbelief. Count Lucien stood at her side, a silent pillar of support, acknowledging the truth of her words. As Henri's face paled, the weight of his deceit became unbearable. The court, once enchanted by his charm, now turned against him, the whispers morphing into a chorus of condemnation. Emily felt a surge of power as she faced Henri, the man who had tried to tear her love apart. You sought to ruin my happiness for your own gain, but love will always prevail, she declared, her voice unwavering. The moment was electric, the culmination of fear, love, and courage erupting into a powerful declaration of truth. Count Lucien, witnessing his daughter's bravery and the love that shone in her eyes for Pierre, felt the walls of his own pride begin to crumble. He stepped forward, addressing the crowd with newfound humility. I was wrong, blinded by my own expectations. Love knows no boundaries, and I stand with my daughter. As the court fell into a stunned silence, Emily's heart raced. She looked towards Pierre, who stood at the edge of the gathering, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. In that moment, she knew their love had triumphed over the darkness that had threatened to tear them apart. With her father's acknowledgement, Emily crossed the room, the crowd parting for her as she reached Pierre. Their eyes locked, and in that gaze, they found solace. We will build our future together, she whispered, a promise sealed between them. As the court reeled from the revelations, Count Lucien took a bold step towards Pierre. Young man, he began, his voice steady, I apologize for the way I treated you. You have my blessing to pursue a life with my daughter. The air crackled with the energy of new beginnings. Emily and Pierre, once separated by class and circumstance, now stood united in the face of adversity. The history of their families intertwined, not as enemies, but as partners in a love story that would defy the odds. In the days that followed, the chateau slowly began to heal. The garden, once a symbol of division, transformed into a haven of love and hope. Emily and Pierre worked side by side, revitalizing the roses and nurturing the blossoms. With every petal they tended to, they cultivated not just a garden, but a future filled with promise. The sun set over Chateau de Lumière, casting a warm glow over the gardens, illuminating the path ahead. Emily and Pierre stood hand in hand, their hearts intertwined, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by the power of love and the strength of their family's legacies.